Well, we have entered into a new year, 2026. And the beginning of this year, we are going to start off by talking about building strong relationships. What makes a relationships truly strong? What is it that we can do to develop those stronger relationships in our marriages, in our other relationships, our friendships? What can we do to make sure we are building strong relationships? Because we're surrounded by a bunch of advice that we see online, whether it be on social media or podcasts or different books or just the opinions of so many others. But relationships, there's a pattern that we can follow that goes back to the scriptures. And today we're going to be looking at 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 to 7, where Peter gives us some timeless principles that speak to us today. And in these 7 verses, it's talking more about marriage, but they're principles that can apply to each and every one of us every day. And so 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 to 7. Wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. Your beauty should not come from outward adornments, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. For this is the way the holy women of the past, who put their hope in God, used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. And so from these 7 verses, there's a few insights, a few principles that we could follow when it comes to building our own relationships, whether it's with our spouse or close friends. And number 1, the importance of actions over arguments. The way we live instead of the way we talk. Verses 1 and 2, he says, wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. And so he's talking about our actions being the predominant way, or the dominant way, that we share our faith, really, because people rarely change through arguments. I'm sure we've all been through situations where we've tried to convince somebody of what we believe through arguing, and it usually fails. And you see this all throughout social media and the arguments that take place on that platform, or in family get-togethers, how arguments can arise about different political parties or religions, or there's just a gamut of different things that we fight over. But people rarely change through arguments. Real influence comes from what people see over time, not from what they hear. And we've always said actions speak louder than words. And actions over arguments will win more people by the way we live rather than arguing our point of view. And what it comes down to is consistent character builds credibility that words alone cannot. And that's why Peter's saying, live at peace with your husband, so that even if they don't believe the word, they might be influenced by the way you live your life. And so like today, social media, it's full of debates and comment battles back and forth. We need to realize as we go into a new year, but not just a new year, every day, that our most powerful testimony is still our daily conduct. Because there are people that are watching our lives each and every day, and we don't know who all is watching our lives. But those people that are watching our life, they pay more attention to how we live over to what we say. And so actions over arguments. Another point he makes is number 2, that to pursue the inner beauty over outer appearance. And he continues on, Peter continues on, he's talking about women, love your husbands and live right by them. And he says, your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. And so here he's talking to wives, he's talking to women, but I think it can pertain to every one of us. The fact that he is not saying that nice clothes and jewelry is a bad thing. What he is saying, he's making the point that it's about what we prioritize. If we're trying to put on the facade of something nice so that people pay attention to us because of our outward appearance, we're missing the point. You know, his audience at the time, and it's not much different from today, his audience, they spent large amounts of money on their appearance. And we do the same thing today. You know, you look at social media or ads on TV or ads in magazines, none of that is real. It's real people, but they use filters and cosmetic procedures and they just fix things so that things look better than what they actually are. You know, sometimes if you see these models without their makeup on, they're just normal people. But it's all that outward adornment that draws people. And so we spend so much time, women and men alike, we spend so much time and money trying to make the outside look better than what the inside really is. And he makes this comment about what is the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. What is the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit? It's not about being silent in the presence of others. It's not about being passive and let everybody walk over you. Really, it's about inner peace and stability. It's about something that doesn't change with the circumstances. You know, we are the same no matter what's coming our way. And that unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit is just that inner peace, the stability, the strength that comes from knowing who we are and not having to pretend by putting on airs, putting on the outward appearance. And this kind of gentle and quiet spirit, the beauty of the gentle and quiet spirit, that is something, it will never wrinkle. It will never go out of style. And it's one of those things, it will draw people in more than our appearance ever could. You know, there's just sometimes we bump into those individuals where just who they are, we're attracted to them, we're drawn to them. Not because of the outward adornment, but because of who they are in the innermost being. And that's one of the things Peter says is, you know, our actions, we need to act instead of argue, but here we need to seek out that inner beauty instead of the outer beauty. And that's how we develop the stronger relationships, through how we act, but developing the inner beauty that is within all of us. Another way to build relationships. Number 3 is courage, having courage over fear. He continues in verses 5 and 6. 5 and 6. For this is the way the holy women of the past, who put their hope in God, used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. And that last sentence is the important part of this passage or this section. The fact that do what is right and do not give way to fear. And you think about it, how many of our decisions are based on fear? And I'm preaching to myself on this one. You know, the fear of rejection. I don't want to do something, say something to somebody and be rejected. The fear of failure, not trying something new or trying something that you've been wanting to do, but you don't try it because you're afraid you're going to fail. Or the fear of what other people think. I know in my life, that's one of those, the big areas. I mean, all of those. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to fail. I don't want others to think less of me. But Peter invites us to not fear, to have courage. You know, really, fear pushes us toward people-pleasing and away from doing what's right. That's why when we're in a crowd of people and the right thing to do will end up separating you from the crowd, that's when fear takes over. And we have to have that courage to step out, to do what is right, and not give way to fear. And what Peter's invitation to us is that not that fear disappears, but it doesn't control who we are. It doesn't control our decisions. It doesn't control our actions. We do what is right and not give way to fear. Instead, we are to live from conviction and not react from worry, not worrying about what others are going to think, but living from that conviction of this is how I need to live my life and how I want to live my life. You know, a lot of times in relationships, if we allow fear to control us, we become defensive. Something is said, an action is done, and we're defensive. Why is that going on? What's happening? Or fear makes us to become controlling. Where do you think you're going? I need to go with you. Or that fear makes us withdrawn, that we don't do anything because we're afraid of what we might do to this friend, how this friend might react, the situations that we're in. Where if we live with faith, to do what is right, it frees us to love openly, to speak honestly. You know, if something's going on, that we are honest and truthful with one another, that we trust God with the outcomes that we can't control. And so he encourages us to live with courage over fear. Don't let fear control your day-to-day life. Live with the courage that comes from God. Then Peter says that it talks about having honor over neglect. You know, honor those that we are with, honor our spouses, honor those closest to us, and don't neglect them. Verse 7, he turns his attention to the husbands, and he says, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. Treat them with respect as the weaker partner, and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. And these words that he spoke or that he wrote to these people, they were radical at that time. You know, women had really nothing, no status whatsoever in that culture. And here Peter says you need to be considerate with them and treat them with respect and treat them as heirs with you. Equality, honor, understanding, respect. And these are things that still challenge us today. Honor over neglect. He says be considerate, which basically means seek to understand in those important relationships. Don't assume that you already know everything about your spouse or this close friend. Instead, take time to listen and to learn and to pay attention, to honor that person, that husband, that wife, that friend, to be considerate and understand their position, understand what their needs are, truly understand what they need in that moment. He says, be considerate. He says, treat with respect or give honor. Honor those who are closest to you. Literally meaning to give high value to that individual, not to neglect them, not to forget about them, not to just pass by them, but to lift them up. Not just tolerating someone, but actively showing their worth through how we serve them, how we care for them. And then he makes the comment about heirs together, that they are equal standing. Now, this was controversial. You know, the man is the head of the home, still is, but we are heirs together. We have equal standing in that we have complete equality when it comes to our spiritual standing. We've all been given the gift of grace and life eternal through Christ. And we have that shared destiny because of God's grace. And so we need to be heirs together, equal standing when it comes to our spiritual lives. And to build each other up and encourage one another, to honor one another and not neglect one another. But here's the interesting thing. The kicker in all of this honor and understanding over neglect. Neglecting these things hinders our prayers. You know, he says, don't think that if you don't do these things, if you don't do these things, it's going to affect your prayer life. Relationship health directly affects our spiritual health. That we can't mistreat our spouse or our closest friends, those that are the most important relationships in our lives, and expect our prayer life to thrive. How we love people actually reflects our love for God. And so if we want to have that stronger prayer life, we need to honor and understand our personal and our important relationships. So what does this mean for us today? Pretty simple. One is that influence flows from our character, not the control that we have. We cannot force people to change. All we can do is live in a way that draws them towards something better. Not so that we gain attention for ourselves, but that we point people to Christ, that we point people to that relationship with God. We influence by our actions, not through our arguments. The fact that inner transformation matters more than external performance. You know, we need to stop trying so hard to look good toward others, and we need to start investing in who we are becoming. The internal part of us, the spiritual, the soul of us, that we become, we are transformed by the renewing of our mind. We're transformed by the Spirit of God within us internally. Let that be the focus of our attention, not the outward adornment of what we look like, what we wear. Understand that relationships require intentionality. You know, good marriages, good friendships, they don't happen by accident. It takes time, ongoing understanding and honor and investment in those relationships. That is what is needed to have and build those strong relationships that we all need and desire. And how we treat others, remember, how we treat others affects our walk with God. Our relationships are of greater importance than we often realize. The fact that if we are not treating people properly will affect our prayer life. How we love people reflects and shapes our love for God. we need to keep that in mind as we go about our days. So as we move into 2026, we want to build strong relationships with our spouses, with our kids, with our closest friends. Take up the advice that Peter gives. Our actions over arguing, the inner beauty instead of the outer beauty. Just showing honor and respect to those friendships and close relationships that we have. And let us pursue 2026 in the light of building strong relationships with those who are important around us. Well, the Lord bless you all. Thank you for spending some time with me, and I hope to see you again next time. God bless.